Hi, my name is Steve Endo, and I'm a Microsoft Dynamics GP MVP. Today I asked the question, are SQL Server Subqueries bad? And I realized I didn't really know. I probably had some conceptions about them, but I'd never actually done tests to find out for myself. So let's find out. So for background, for the past several years, I've noticed that I've been avoiding subqueries. And I didn't really know why until I thought about it this morning. I assumed that they did not perform as well as a similar query using a join. So this morning I came up with some sample queries and tried them out against the TWO Fabricam database for Dynamics GP. And the results were pretty surprising. So just to show you what I have here, I am querying the IV 101 table, the item master table, and seeing how many times each item appears in the SOP history line table, SOP 30300. And so for reference, I have a slightly modified version of Fabricam where I have roughly 230 items, but I have over 73,000 SOP line items in history. So a little more than what you'd get out of the box. So let's take a look here. So my first query is this subquery, and I am selecting the item number from the IV 101 table, and then I do a subquery against SOP 303 for each item. So I perform a count. So for every item, how many lines did I find in SOP 303 for that item? Pretty straightforward. So if I run that, I get 230 results, one for each item number, and it runs in less than a second, very fast, no performance issues. Then I wrote a similar query, but I used a join this time. So I used a left outer join against SOP 303. I grouped by item number, got a count for each item in the SOP table, and I get the same results, 230 rows, less than 1 second. Both appear relatively quick with this small data set. So how do we compare these? Well, one technique is to use set statistics IO and time. And this feature allows you to compare two queries that are similar or simple, and you can compare them side by side. So you run them together, I get the results, and I can go to the Messages tab here, and I can see that this query ran in 106 milliseconds. The second query ran in 119. Now, if you run these multiple times, you'll get slightly different times in terms of milliseconds, but they're effectively the same. And that's the set statistics time result. Now, if we look at statistics IO, what do we see? We see we had 4 logical reads against IV 101 and 470 logical reads against SOP 303. And I believe that has to do with the number of pages that were read as part of these queries. So we have 4 and 470 for the first query using the subquery. But below, wait a minute, I have 4 and 470 for the join. That's not what I was expecting. So here we're seeing effectively the same elapsed time and identical IO statistics. Very interesting. So what's the next step? Well, I have actual execution plan enabled up at the top here in my toolbar. So let's take a look at the execution plan tab. Very interesting. We see 50% of the cost went to query 1 and 50% of the cost went to query 2. So I see a 50-50 split between both queries, meaning they're effectively the same in terms of performance. And if you look closely at those execution plans, what do you see? Let me make it a little bigger. Now, the first few times I ran this, the execution plans were not identical. But if you look at this now, as far as I can tell, they are identical. 89% on the index scan on the SOP table, 1% on the index scan on the item master table. And then we have a 1% cost to join them in, a 9% stream aggregate. I'd have to look that up to see what that means, but it's doing the summary there for our count is what it looks like. Identical execution plans. So in this case, and let me qualify this, In this case, on SQL Server 2014 SP1 against my Fabricam database with this limited result set using these simple queries, there is absolutely no difference that I can tell between a query that uses a subquery and a similar query that uses a join. There's no performance impact or negative performance impact for the subquery. There's no additional cost to the subquery. So if I want to use a subquery here, great. If I find it more readable for some reason, great. I'll go ahead and use it. Now, with that said, if you have a slightly different table, a different version of SQL Server, more records, maybe you perform these exact same queries on your production database with more records, you may get wildly different execution plans. And also, as I saw when I was testing this, the first time I ran this, or the first few times, I did have different execution plans. But as I ran it more, SQL Server tuned its execution plans, and the query optimizer discovered, hey, these are identical. These are exactly the same. And going forward, I'm going to run the exact same execution plan for both. But that's not always the case. It could be that you have slightly different indexes, slightly different statistics, slightly different data distributions that cause different result sets and different execution plans. But it means that subqueries and correlated subqueries are not always a slower performing option. So that was interesting. I'm surprised by it. It's contrary to what I would have guessed. And with this version of SQL Server, the query optimizer is able to figure that out and do a very good job for both. So, hope that helped and hope you find that interesting. Have a good one.